Good morning, everyone. I would like to begin by welcoming all our dear colleagues and friends to this very timely event. Of course, on behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I would like to welcome everyone to this virtual meeting to discuss the impact of COVID-19 on education around the world and respective financial needs. We thank, of course, the main organizers, the Qatar Fund for Development, and the Qatari-based organization Education Above All for organizing together with us this very timely event. Dear colleagues, as you all know, the COVID-19 pandemic is a public health crisis, a social economic crisis, and a severe education crisis as well. Schools have closed in 191 countries, affecting more than 1.5 billion students. This is unprecedented. Children in developing countries, in conflict-affected areas, and the most vulnerable and marginalized are the ones suffering the most. As learning has switched to online platforms, this crisis is likely to deepen the digital divide. We cannot allow a human tragedy to unfold. We cannot allow hope to die for the millions of children and youth who want to learn, long for stability and desire for a better future, because their countries cannot afford to give them the opportunity. We have witnessed a dramatic reduction in public services and crumbling of safety nets. Therefore, we hope that today's discussion will underline the alternative and innovative ways to fund education, not only during the pandemic, but most importantly, the recovery phase as well. A couple of questions must be urgently addressed in today's timely event. One, what does building back better mean for education in developing and conflict-affected countries? Two, how do we ensure inclusion and equality education and equality of opportunities are central to the future of education? Allow me now to highlight some good news. As per General Assembly Resolution 74/275, this coming 9th of September, the world will celebrate for the first time the International Day for the Protection of Education from Attack. This huge accomplishment, as the General Assembly adopted the resolution by consensus, sending a clear message on the importance of safeguarding schools as places of protection and safety for students and educators, and the need to keep attacks on education on the top of the public agenda. Most importantly, it recognizes that access to quality education in humanitarian emergencies can foster longer-term development goals. As you may know, Her Highness, of course, Sheikha Moza bint Nasser al-Musnad, chairperson of Education Above All Foundation and UN Sustainable Development Goal advocate, was the force behind the adoption of the General Assembly resolution. Her Highness had a clear view that the world needs a dedicated day to reaffirm the right to education for all, and the importance of ensuring safe, enabling environments for those most vulnerable. Attacks on education destroy the hopes and ambitions of the whole generation of children, and this has to stop. Therefore, I invite all of you, of course, to join us in celebrating the first anniversary of the International Day on Protecting Education from Attack on September 9th. I now have the great pleasure, of course, to introducing our able moderator today, Mr. Robert Jenkins, who generously agreed to moderate today's event. Robert, of course, is a very well-known colleague, is the Global Chief of Education at UNICEF and has over 20 years of experience in international development and humanitarian programs in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. Robert has repeatedly alerted the world that unless we collectively act now to protect children's educations, society and economies will feel the burden long after we have beaten COVID-19 in the most vulnerable communities. The impact will span generations. Robert, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Ambassador Sheikh Alia, for your kind welcome. It is my great pleasure to moderate today's session of the High-Level Political Forum. And I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm sure we're going to have a very interesting discussion. Before I call on our first panelist and begin the discussion, may I ask for video to be played, please? We have an opening video to introduce the session. May I ask for that to be played now, please?
I say, give me 10 reasons why educating the world's out-of-school children can wait, and I'll give you 10 million reasons why it can't.
Children, because their future is our future, and as we support their dreams today, we support our dreams for a better, more sustainable world tomorrow, for all people everywhere.
So thank you once again to all the participants and all those who are attending this important discussion. Thank you in advance to our panelists and again to Her Excellency, the Ambassador. At UNICEF, we do see this as a once-in-a-generation opportunity for us to reimagine education during these, albeit very challenging times. That includes opening up better education systems that address the unique needs of all children, including the most marginalized. Before inviting our esteemed speakers, please allow me to apologize in advance. We have a very ambitious agenda with very many esteemed speakers, so we will need to stick to the agreed time. And that will involve me also, if required, giving you a 1-minute notice to end your interventions, and then I'm encouraging you to wrap up at the end of your allotted 5 minutes to each of the speakers. I would also encourage our guests and the participants and those who have joined this discussion to please pose any questions or reactions in the chat function of the Zoom, and we will hope to engage with all of you and address those. Both the panelists will be looking at those as they move forward, but also at the end of the session. So without further ado, I'm honored to introduce His Excellency Dr. Mamadou Tangara, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Cooperation and Gambians Abroad of the Republic of the Gambia, who will set the stage on the value of education, particularly access to primary education, and how the current pandemic has had an impact on the world's poorest children. Your Excellency, Dr. Tangara, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and it's a pleasure to see my good sister Alia, a very good colleague of mine, opening this very important discussion. Chairperson of the Education Above All Foundation, the Chief Executive Officer of Education Above All Foundation, the Director General of the Qatar Fund For Development, Your Excellency, distinguished participants. Before starting to go and start reading my statement, I think it's important for us to set the stage. You know, education is very challenging in our part of the world. I will take my own example. I really resented going to school, coming from a family where none of my parents went to school. For me, school was like an ordeal, and I really hated school, to be quite honest. And because I didn't understand the value of going to school. And I was only motivated to go to school because my father promised to get me a bicycle if I work hard in school. And thanks to that bicycle, I went up to a level where I got my PhD. But I unfortunately never got the bicycle from my father. But a very good friend of mine gave me the bicycle. That is just to say that many children here in Africa go to school and they don't realize the value of education. It's later on when you see your colleagues succeeding that you started regretting why I didn't work hard in school. Today we are faced with a very challenging situation with COVID-19, and it will widen the gap between the have and the have-nots clearly. And without much ado, I will read my statement, and if in the course of the discussion, if we have questions and answers, we can talk about, elaborate other points. It is a great honor and privilege to be given this unique opportunity to deliver a keynote address on this auspicious occasion. I want to take this opportunity to extend greetings of His Excellency President Adama Barrow, President of the Republic of the Gambia. And I sincerely thank the Director General of Qatar Fund for Development, the Chairperson of Education Above All Foundation, for convening this very important virtual meeting on the theme, Education in the Trying Times of COVID-19. My task is to summarize the challenges the Gambia faces in addressing the effects of COVID-19 on education. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Gambia had been making significant progress on SDG 4, on quality education, especially in terms of gross primary enrollment. The UNDP report on the impact of COVID-19 in the Gambia states that the school closures has affected 67,000 children in the Gambia. This number only refers to children attending nursery to senior secondary school and not including tertiary education, where we have over 6,000 students. The implications are that it will be difficult for school to achieve 100% school contact hours in the 2020 academic year. The government of the Gambia, through the Ministry of Education, had to close all schools to minimize the spread of the pandemic. This decision poses difficulties for students, schools, families, and government. To address these challenges, the government of the Gambia employed a mix of innovative response strategies, including high-tech, low-tech, and no-tech strategies to bring about this alternate platform. Students in all categories of public schools, nursery, lower basic schools, upper basic schools, senior secondary schools receive their lectures through radio and TV. Colleges and universities and international schools delivered lectures through online classes. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, sailing through these new and uncharted territories of having to shift teaching and learning pose significant challenges to all stakeholders in the education sector, including the following. Distant learning and homeschooling pose great challenge as parents are unprepared. There is a high economic cost given that most parents cannot work as they have to take care of their children at home. Some teachers lack the requisite IT skills to deliver lessons online, given that teacher training curriculum does not include this sort of skills. It's also challenges that many students have no access to the internet or even to radio. That's a big challenge in many parts of the Gambia. And in the rural areas where parents are also forced because of their conditions, they do not have they don't have electric supply, regular electric supply. So it's a big challenge. I don't know how we're going to tackle with this problem, but now the government has decided to send students who are about to do their examination to classes. So the others are still staying at home, and we are trying to devise ways and means, map out strategies to deal with this new situation and challenge. But of course, it's going to be very challenging, and we don't want to declare the year null and void, but this year will be very difficult. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you for keeping within the time, and thank you for sharing your own story. Indeed, very challenging and yet very inspiring. Our next key speaker is His Excellency Khalifa Hassim Al-Kawadi, the Director General of the Qatar Fund for Development. Your Excellency, welcome and thank you for joining us. It's very much appreciated. Given your leading role in managing the state of Qatar's foreign aid and international development, and the fact that many development or all development assistance at the moment are facing very many challenges to meet the growing needs, we would appreciate your insights on the nature of the demands you are receiving and how your organization is balancing long-term sustainable solutions with the urgent needs and the pressing needs at the moment. You have the floor, Your Excellency.
Thank you. Let me welcome you and all the esteemed speakers. So it gives me enormous pleasure to welcome you all today to this virtual event on education and the trying time of COVID-19. First and foremost, I wish to seize this opportunity to commend Education Above All for their firm commitment toward ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education for vulnerable and marginalized children around the world. I warmly welcome all esteemed key speakers. Your knowledge and expertise come at critical time where there is urgency to reflect on how to rebuild the education system that are more resilient to shocks. I also welcome all participants joining us today to this important event, government officials, partners, stakeholders, students, and observers. This discussion comes at the time where the international community is at crossroads, facing the choice between continuing to prioritize rapid response and focus on long-term sustainable solutions. Disruptive and deadly as it is, the current pandemic has obliged us to mobilize our resources and shift the focus toward responding to the wave of global humanitarian needs prompted by the outbreak. We live in an increasingly unpredictable and complex world. Taking the coronavirus as a point in case, the pandemic has disrupted the education system around the world. Many countries have adopted remote learning as well as alternative learning pathways to ensure the continuity of education. And while this has proven to be a very successful alternative for many children, for instance, my children as well, its negative impact on others are multidimensional, risking that millions slip through the cracks. Due to the connectivity challenges and limited access to electricity, for instance, digital education is out of reach for many disadvantaged children. And those from food insecure households that relied on school for nutrition are exposed to food insecurity. We cannot overlook the fact that school closure during COVID-19 have further exacerbated existing inequality and further marginalized vulnerable children. Hence, as a donor agency, in our quest for sustainable solutions that leave no one behind, and taking stock of the disruption caused by COVID-19, focusing on restoring system in a post-COVID-19 education world and embedding resilience building at the systematic community and individual levels into our efforts is at most importance to ensure out-of-school children and those who have not been able to attend schooling find their way back to formal education. Consequently, delivering greater gains for education and better footing for the successful implementation of the SDGs. Ladies and gentlemen, the current crisis has also illustrated that there is a great potential in working with the private sector on an ever larger scale and across industry for education, innovation, and technology enhancement. There is also a need to follow a holistic cross-sector approach to education that consider the interlinkages between education, health, skills development, and economic empowerment for society to prosper and thrive, thereby contributing to sustainable development solutions. We at Qatar Fund for Development, thanks to support for Qatari-based strategic partners such as Education Above All, were able to apply such holistic approach in the Quest program, which provide children and youth affected by the Syrian crisis and neighboring countries with access to quality education, healthcare, skills for the future employment. That said, 50% of Qatar Fund for Development resources are allocated to education through different co-funding models. It leverages on the expertise and outreach of multilateral agencies whose strategic objectives are well aligned with those of QFFD, as shown by our support to UNICEF, UNHCR, UNRWA, for example, given support to sustainable education, psychological support, and extracurricular activities for refugees. It goes without
Your Excellency, you have 30 seconds.
It goes without saying that we also capitalize on the comparative advantage of Qatar strategic partners such as Education Above All and Al-Fakhura. Finally, while the pandemic may have set back some of the progress made on the SDGs, this should not compromise our efforts. We therefore call for a collective and systematic response to such shocks, as well as rebuilding an education system that allow for greater innovation, sustainability, and equity and inclusion. I thank you for your attention and I wish you the most fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for re-emphasizing the theme of reaching the most marginalized and the challenges that specific children are facing. Thank you also for bringing up the very important of the multidimensional impact of the crisis that moves beyond a narrow view of education and learning. Very much appreciated, and thanks again. Our next panelist is a longtime partner of UNICEF, but as a key member of the global education community and a global leader on education, Ms. Stefania Gianni, the Assistant Director General of Education for UNESCO. And she will now share with a video message on how UNESCO is supporting ministries of education in states around the world to reopen schools. Can we play her video now, please?
Thank you very much for this invitation to the permanent representative of the State of Qatar and to the organizer of this important event. Very happy to be with you today. And let me say that we meet at a time of a deep crisis, which also can give us some new opportunities for children and youth worldwide. The reopening of schools is not a back to normal. We know very well. We must do things not only differently, but better than it was in the past. While governments were so quick to respond to the crisis, being a bit obliged to close schools as a protection measure, the decision to reopen them is far more sensitive and complex. And the pandemic is still evolving. It's a very still uncertain picture around the world. According to our data, schools remain closed in some 117 countries so far, still affecting almost 1 billion youth and students. And many countries have not yet announced reopening dates. So we are seeing diametrically opposed approaches with those schools that have started to reopen. And we are monitoring the process, and we are accompanying countries in order to make their system more resilient and adapt to the new situation. We know from previous crises that the longer schools remain closed, and the higher the risk of education exclusion and learning loss, especially for the most vulnerable and marginalized children and youth. Girls in particular very much most affected, as we learned from the Ebola crisis, for instance, recently. As half of the world students don't have access to the internet at home, the chance of learning loss over this period is nearly unavoidable, and even when alternatives are in place, we see many alternatives put in place as the radio channels, TV channels, delivering lessons and content of learning. But according to our estimates, 70 million children and youth are at risk of not returning to school. It's a question of a dropout because of the post-COVID-19 crisis. So proactive policy measures must be taken in order to reach the most marginalized and in order to provide them and their families with every support to return to school. This is our mission, this is our common agenda today. The situation is global and is really unprecedented in the history. Policy guidance and peer learning has never been more important than what we see they can do today. They can help to make the right policy choices, ones that place safety, inclusion and equity at the very center, at the very core of political agenda in all different regions of the world. And then to support countries through the process, the UN system under UNESCO leadership really has been established through the last months a new kind of partnership. For instance, UNESCO, UNICEF and the World Bank produced recently a practical framework for reopening schools that is very much utilized in order to have a checklist and be sure that sanitary measures and all the other necessary policies can be implemented at that moment. And over the past month, we have jointly organized a series of webinars to help decision makers address critical issues from student well-being and school safety to remedial learning and organizing exams, teachers training, and the gender dimension and everything which is very much related to the new context we are living within. They are essentials to respect. Let me mention them briefly. First is about to save the lives and well-being of children, students, teachers, and communities, including all the school systems and what is around education. And this is the context which is not, of course, one size for all. This is a very well context-oriented approach, and this is about the capacity of schools to mitigate risks of infection and promote healthy behaviors. Second point, very much important as well, is about thinking that every school must focus on the learning recovery process and social-emotional well-being. This begins by assessing where students stand in order to set up remedial programs and to support teachers. We play such a critical role in these exceptional circumstances, and also it's a good opportunity to rethink the role and the function of teachers in the classroom. And last but really not least, the school reopening is a time to capitalize on innovation deployed during this period in the use of technology and in the use of new pedagogies. Many governments are already moving towards more hybrid learning processes, and I think that this kind of innovative laboratory of learning and teaching can really help to prepare better the system for future crises. This requires, for sure, more resources for education, not less. This is a time then to protect and promote education as one of the pillars for building better and recovery policies. And it's time to protect and to promote the need of increasing education budgets and not being education left behind. We need all countries and all partners really on board to prioritize education as the foundation for an equitable and resilient recovery, and from protecting an entire generation. Ensuring this is a shared responsibility, collective responsibility for UNESCO, the Global Education Coalition, and all our partners. I thank you very much, and I wish a fruitful discussion.
Thank you very much, Stefania, very much appreciated. May I now turn to our next panelist, who's another a key UN partner from the World Health Organization, Mr. Stuart Simonson, who's the Assistant Director General. Stuart, thanks very much for joining us and making the time to participate in this important discussion as a panelist. The WHO has been at the forefront of the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We'd really appreciate your thoughts on how health and education can work together to address this challenge while both sectors are facing increasing financial needs. How can we ensure sustainable financing in the long term? Mr. Stewart, over to you.
Okay. Thank you for the question and for inviting WHO to be part of this very important discussion. COVID-19 has seen many of our worst fears become reality. It has exposed the fragility of global health security as well as the human and economic toll of under-resourced health systems. And it has exacerbated the existing inequalities, leaving many vulnerable, many vulnerable. As we enter the 7th month of the pandemic, the numbers we are seeing are troubling, actually beyond troubling, and continue to rise. We have surpassed the 11 million mark cases and over 500,000 deaths. COVID-19 represents a massive setback to every aspect of health and development. But its impact will be even worse if we resign ourselves to simply clawing our way back to the baseline instead of transforming approaches, revisiting decisions on resource allocation, and strengthening institutions. Children, for whom the evidence thus far indicates lower infection, morbidity, and mortality rates from COVID-19, thus far, are vulnerable, particularly girls and young people from minority groups, those with disabling conditions, and those who are in low resource settings, or situations of conflict, violence, or emergency. 4 major channels have been identified by which COVID-19 impacts the lives of children through the direct effects of infection with the virus, through the indirect effect of the pandemic on children's access to health and social services, through socioeconomic impacts of the virus itself, and through the socioeconomic impact of the measures to contain the virus. COVID-19 and the physical distancing measures imposed in response to it have also greatly increased the risk of intrafamily violence and online abuse. As indicated in the Global Status Report on Preventing Violence Against Children, movement restrictions, loss of income, isolation, overcrowding have heightened levels of stress and anxiety in parents, caregivers, and children, and cut families and individuals off from their usual support systems, be they friends, extended family, or colleagues. A return to school and work will likely reduce the stress on parents, caregivers, and children, and reinvigorate their social support systems, and thus lessen the risk of children experiencing and witnessing abuse in the home. But despite a return to work, unemployment and household financial security may remain problematic and chronic, and access to social protection and social welfare might, in many contexts, be reduced. For example, it is all too often that schools, clinics, hospitals, and other public spaces lack hand hygiene facilities, putting children, teachers, and healthcare workers at risk. Believe it or not, globally, 2 in 5 healthcare facilities do not have hand hygiene at the point of care. 2 in 5. It is essential that we begin to address these challenges now and in a collaborative manner. WHO has joined the UNESCO initiative, Global COVID-19 Education Coalition, creating unity of effort among multilateral partners and the private sector. WHO has also developed mechanisms to help parents interact constructively with their children during this time of confinement, covering planning, one-to-one time, staying positive, creating a daily routine, avoiding bad behavior, managing stress, and talking about COVID-19. With multiple digital solutions like the WHO Academy, there is a new focus on learning and building competencies also for healthcare professionals and caregivers, aiming to bring lifelong learning possibilities. COVID-19 has reinforced the existing evidence that investment in health, education, and other social systems have long-term returns, while underinvestment has potential large-scale socioeconomic implications. I think if COVID-19 has taught us anything, it is that. COVID-19 can be a catalyst for reorienting national priorities toward the achievement of the SDGs, providing the political momentum needed for national health system reform, including public financing management and regulatory systems. These reforms should include not only increased investment in the health sector, but also
30 seconds.
Also strong multi-sectoral policies, including education, led by a whole of government approach. As I said, if COVID-19 has taught us anything, it's that achieving the SDGs is not a luxury. It is essential, and we should focus on that. And some good will come out of this terrible chapter in our history. Thank you very much. I appreciate being included.
Thank you very much, Stuart, for such insightful comments. The summary of the multidimensional elements, the disproportionate impact on the poorest, but also calling for a thinking big, thinking strategic, and reimagining. Very much appreciated. It's my great pleasure now to introduce the next panelist, a friend of mine, Dr. Jaime Saavedra, the Director of Education for the World Bank. Thanks for making the time to join us on this panel, Jaime. Having heard from the other panelists, we'd welcome your thoughts on what lessons can parents, teachers, ministries derive from these previous months and these challenging times in dealing with the crisis. And how can these lessons shape the immediate and medium-term response that we must now all put in place? Jaime, over to you.
Thank you very much, Rob, and thanks for the invitation and for the possibility of sharing this panel. So look, I think I don't want to repeat some of the points that I've made, but I think we all have to be cognizant that this is probably the largest crisis we will ever live on education, and the largest crisis of the last century. We've never lived a double shock like that, what we're living now, of having extended school closures in all countries, and at the same time, when more resources are needed, we have a deep economic recession in all countries that will have an impact on public budgets, on family budgets, and on international aid as potentially in international aid as well. So this double shock is something that we have never ever lived. Now we are living extraordinary circumstances. In education systems, as my predecessors have pointed out, are not staying idle. They are trying to do as much as they can in order to mitigate this crisis through multi-platforms of remote learning, including online as much as possible, TV, radio, printed material, social networks, WhatsApp networks. So a lot is many countries are trying to do as much as they can in order to try to give some opportunities to everyone. Right, but we know that the learning losses are going to be huge. We know that the learning losses are going to be inequitable, right? So that's it. So we were saying already that there was a learning crisis. Now this crisis is much deeper, and the baseline that we have is much more unequal. But in this reaction process, there are many things that the different players have learned. There are many myths that have been debunked. So one is first that parents will be now very aware, first of all, that education is a social process, that education is an experience, and that their own role, their parents' role in the education process is absolutely critical. But second, understanding that education is a social experience, they will understand and will have a much better recognition of the critical role of teachers. And this should imply that we all as societies, right, would really have the opportunity to recognize the critical role that teachers play. And we all know that what predicts a good, well-functioning education system is how much we value the role of teachers. So I think that new understanding by parents and society as a whole of the need to invest in the human factor, right, is absolutely critical. Second, I think there's another myth that has been debunked, that we all thought that technology could solve everything, that eventually a robot could replace the teacher with artificial intelligence or machine learning. Well, we know that's not true. The teachers are absolutely critical, but at the same time, we know that technology could be extremely important, could be absolutely essential in order to support the role of those teachers. So actually, we need to expand dramatically our investments in both the human factor and in technology, and combine them much more effectively in the new normal towards which we are moving. But another lesson, I think, of this crisis is that the digital divide that we're living is immense. And in a way, it's a kind of a slap in the face for all of us, because we have been talking about the digital divide. We knew that there was a digital divide. Well, there you go. Now, now we are living the consequences of not having addressed the digital divide, and many of our many children then, well, will not have the opportunity of a good mitigation process during this pandemic. So we need to act upon aggressively, and we're doing that. We're working jointly, actually, with UNICEF in order to both not only expand connectivity. It's not an issue of connectivity; it's connectivity, and at the same time make sure that teachers have the possibility of using digital resources, and the digital resources are available at the classroom level and well integrated with the curriculum. And finally, and I'm close with that, I think we have another lesson is the importance of all media, of mass media. We have seen that as part of this response to the crisis, many countries are using TV and radio. And at some point we said TV and radio, they're back in the education process. And I think we have 2 points, 2 reflections there. One is that, yes, educational TV can be still extremely powerful in order to give more education opportunities to all children now, very quickly. But second is that there's a huge role and responsibility of mass media, of TV channels, right? Not only in terms of educational programming per se, but in everything that they broadcast, right, has a critical impact on the education of our children. So, like it or not, right, their responsibility in the education process of our children is huge. So many lessons here, many changes in perceptions and attitudes of the different players, of teachers, of parents, on what governments have to do, of mass media, and hopefully those changes in perceptions and attitudes will help us in shaping a new system that is much more resilient and that is much more equitable. Thank you very much, Rob.
Thank you very much, Jaime. Very much appreciate. I also appreciate the common themes you're drawing out from the previous panelists. We're already experiencing a learning crisis, the disproportionate impact on the most vulnerable, but also charting out a pathway for the future. Very much appreciated. Thanks again. So in the interest of time, let me just now give the floor to Mr. Brajesh Pant, the Chief of Education Sector Group of the Asian Development Bank. Mr. Pant, given your leading role in coordinating ADB's strategic support for Asia and the Pacific region's education sector development, we'd appreciate if you could speak to the issue of out-of-school children in your region in particular, and what you see as the potential for a new partnership to address it. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Rob. It's a pleasure to be in this panel. Research is clearly showing that more than quantity of education or average years of schooling, quality of education as measured by students' learning achievements is closely linked to economic growth and innovation capacity of a country. Quality education also contributes to all other sustainable development goals. Despite impressive improvements in physical access to education, many countries are facing serious problems with learning improvements. The progress has been very slow. There is an urgency to find innovative approaches to scaling up learning, just like the global initiative to support education for all. It is not only important to bring school-age children, particularly from disadvantaged groups, to school. It is equally important to ensure that all of them complete school education with foundational skills. But the strategy that works to improve access may not work to improve learning, because learning requires deepening teaching and learning processes and mobilizing resources to monitor and support learning levels of particularly those that are lagging behind, which we are all emphasizing. The good thing is that focusing on foundational literacy and numeracy from an early stage of learning has become more important than ever before. There are good lessons I'm going to reinforce coming from the COVID-19 pandemic. For the first time, such a large-scale disruption happened everywhere. All the education systems were forced to shift to distance learning, but everyone realized how little they are prepared. Online learning and EdTech solutions that were largely prevalent in private education were suddenly mainstreamed in public education as well. But this shift has revealed several important lessons, some of which may be overlapping. First, it revealed inherent inequities existing in the education system, that the same students that were lagging behind are at a greater risk of lagging behind further due to inequitable access to internet and related support mechanisms. Multi-channel of learning, as pointed out earlier, is important depending on low-tech, mid-tech, and high-tech situations. Second, digital contents and assessments are not readily available for effective distance learning at such a scale. Third, teachers are not prepared to manage distance learning. Fourth, the focus of learning shifted from school to home and to parents to support their children. This reinforces the importance of learning not only in school, but outside of school, and particularly in home. Fifth, EdTech solutions that were more confined to private education suddenly got much wider acceptance in public education, thereby underscoring the importance of public-private partnerships for such applications. Sixth, it has become clear that these lessons have to be supported by government policies to apply distance education more systematically by focusing on the promises of EdTech solutions and distance learning. It is also critical to build evidence on these approaches. Finally, it has become clear that distance learning and EdTech solutions are not meant to replace face-to-face learning, but to complement through blended learning to improve teaching and learning based on research and data generated by such approaches. This is the time to rethink and reimagine education. ADB has also joined the global coalition with UNESCO to respond to the COVID-19 crisis. It is important to build strategic partnerships with different types of organizations to complement and support concerned governments to prioritize and simplify modalities and approaches to ensure learning for all. This requires targeting those who are lagging behind and improving teaching and learning strategies. Since scaling up quality is important, appropriate use of education technologies look more promising to support teachers, students, parents, and other stakeholders. I'm pleased to mention that Education Above All and ADB are partnering to focus on out-of-school children. South Asia and Southeast Asia regions still have significant share of out-of-school children. The purpose of this agreement is to bring our combined financial and technical resources to support interested developing member countries to bring out of school children to school ensure that they are all learning. Project activities will be directly related to the identification, enrollment, and retention of out-of-school children in a quality education program and will adhere to solid monitoring and evaluation principles to ensure targeted resources that contribute to no learner being left behind in support of SDG 4. As emphasized by previous speakers, it is important for all of us to take a life cycle approach from the very beginning and whole of government, as others pointed out. This is a multidimensional issue approach to address this challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all the substantive comments you've made, and also keeping with time. Let me also thank the previous panelists. You're making my job easy, and it's very much appreciated. And thanks, Brajesh, again, for such substantive comments. The next panelist now I'm pleased to introduce is Mr. Kames El Kaza, the Senior Advisor to the DG Islamic Solidarity Fund for Development. I would like to start by commending ISFD to the progress made under the impressive commitment that ISFD and Education Above All, EAA, have made to finance out-of-school children in the specific large-scale program in Mali. Could you please share a summary of the progress and outline some of the challenges you feel the education sector and your organization in particular will have to address as a result of COVID-19? You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Rob. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. The Islamic Solidarity Fund, as you know, is the poverty reduction arm of the part of the Islamic Development Bank based in Jeddah. And we have been partnering with Education Above All in addressing the issue of out-of-school children all over the OIC member countries, and particularly in Mali. So the project in Mali is, in fact, it's part of a bigger program which has been launched in 2018. To address this important issue of out-of-school children, not only in Mali, but in other countries like Pakistan, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Niger, and other OIC member countries. The objective of this project is to support and to work closely with the government of Mali and to support their efforts to ensure out-of-school children in Mali have access to quality primary school education. The main target is to achieve 596 plus thousand of out-of-school children back to school and enrolled. The project has succeeded to open new mobile schools for nomadic population, single classroom schools for children in remote location. and worked with Quranic school leaders to integrate the formal government curriculum alongside religious education. It has also trained teachers, school administrator, community teachers, Ministry of Education staff on each of the project case strategies, including pedagogical practices. So the project is progressing very well, although it has started a bit late considering the difficult situation in the country. But let me emphasize on, I think there are very important key additionalities here, just to highlight the importance of this project and this collaboration between ISFD and EAA in Mali. I think the first key additionality is the ability to leverage additional grant resources, and I believe this is very important. I mean, if you take the project cost of this project is around 144 million US dollar. The co-funding from international NGOs and from the government is around 50% of this project. Another key additionality here is the ability also to leverage new implementing partners. So very important to have those partners who have the adequate expertise to deliver the accelerated, innovative strategies to enroll, retain out-of-school children, especially in difficult circumstances and difficult areas like the case here in Mali. And finally, I would say also that the third, I think, key additionality is to have an implementing partner, in this case, an American international NGO, EDC, who can share really knowledge and expertise. This is very important to share it, especially with national and local authorities and communities, and to build capacity to engender the behavior towards education. I think these are the main progress that we believe that we have succeeded at least to bring more than 7,000 out-of-school children in renewed Quranic schools, 6,000 in public schools through community yearly strategy, 3,000 also in accelerated education sector, etc. So the project is still in progress, and hopefully will be completed in the next year, inshallah.
Thank you very much for those insightful comments. Very much appreciated. Let me now move to Dr. Tariq Shima, the country representative Alight in Pakistan. Dr. Shima, how did your organization promote equity during school closures, particularly given the funding challenges? And what have we learned about reinstituting or reimagining education during and after the pandemic? Dr. Shima, you have the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon from Islamabad. 2 years back, we have embarked on a very ambitious goal of enrolling and retaining 1 million out-of-school children with the support of education above all. And as we reach to 80% of our target, we have bumped into global pandemic. And I think pretty much like rest of the world, we weren't quite ready how to address that issue. So being a physician in my past life, or rather surgeon who has worked in the emergency areas, I think we were very much committed that we should now be looking at what could be the emergency arrangements we can do. So in the case of catastrophes, when you do not have the luxury of ample time or planning or resources, you have to start from wherever you can, and what I would call is do the doable. And I have heard from the previous speakers talking about that it is not always going to be high tech or heavy resource programs, but you should also be looking at the simple things that might turn out to be very impactful. So in a very short time, less than 3 weeks, we were able to assemble the curriculum specialist and use an SLO-based curriculum development for the radio. And with that, we have started this program in the northern side of Pakistan, where we were originally reaching to about 30,000 children. We were able to reach more than 250,000 children through radio programs. Based on that success, we have not only made it an open source through YouTube, but we are now transferring and transforming this program to be equally used for the very far-flung areas, particularly the Balochistan and Azad Kashmir and some part of the Sindh. So in a country where we have been working almost covering half of the geographic area and target on 1 million children with these low-cost, high-impact technologies, all of a sudden we find the opportunity to reaching many more millions through the sound waves. And I think this is pretty much the lesson we have learned. We are still continuing to make efforts on that front and see if we can come up with technology or interventions that can be sustainable, because how the rest of the world can perhaps bank on the experience we have learned. How can we learn from the rest of the world to scale it up? So I think COVID-19 opportunity also is an opportunity for all of us to see what about those millions of children that we would have probably spent a lot of more time, energy, and resources to reach out, how these new innovation that has been a reaction to the COVID-19 closure of the conventional school systems, how can we perhaps refine it more? How can we co-create and co-develop these interventions and perhaps, fast our, path and the pace towards reaching to the many more million of out-of-school children. And this is what I think we would like to take that experience to other countries, because it is not that we have to work in one language. It can be developed in a same method in multiple languages. It is extremely low cost. The technology is available. The technical experts are available. So something that we have not envisioned 2 years ago has become all of a sudden our mainstay. And we still believe that this is not the alternative to the regular education, but perhaps this is the best thing we could do to prevent millions of children from detaching or disengaging from the education, which has been already, we have put a lot of effort to bring them into the school, because out-of-school children are the kids who generally are away. And then you make a lot of effort through community mobilization and many other interventions to bring them in. Now we don't want them to lose their interest. And that's why we created this very interactive program, which has a combination of not just the academic, but it also stories and multiple games and things like that. And recently, the story has been picked up by the international media. BBC has run a documentary on that. So I think this is an opportunity for all of us to see, let's think, out of the box and see if we can co-create, co-develop interventions that can perfectly help us in a situation like this.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I really appreciate the insights and the practical nature, and thinking out of the box. Very impressive. It's my pleasure now to introduce the next panelist, Dr. Safiqul Islam, who is the Director of BRAC's Education Program in Bangladesh. Dr. Islam, we appreciate if you could share BRAC's experience and lessons learned regarding how you've promoted equity and access during these challenging times. Dr. Islam, over to you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Very good evening from Dhaka. It's really a pleasure to join this very exciting discussion. I have put 3 slides I believe would be helpful to all of us to see that how Bangladesh is responding to this COVID and what is the kind of strategy that Bangladesh is working on as part of its response during COVID and post-COVID. And this slide will also show you that how we can maximize our capacities by putting our energies together, by putting our experiences together. And finally, I will be talking in terms of our lessons. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. You are all aware of that when we talk Bangladesh, a heavily densely populated country, at the basic education level, we are talking no less than 30 million children. I repeat, no less than 30 million children. Thanks to all of your supports and collective efforts, during the pre-COVID, Bangladesh had more girls in school than boys. It was a historical achievement. The COVID is jeopardizing our momentum in education, and we are seriously concerned of that. Thanks to the government, quickly responded for a distance learning solution. And thanks to collective efforts, particularly in the research communities, who quickly looked into what the solutions are in the COVID, how it works. What we see that while there are excitements in these solutions, there are also concerns that we have to take into consideration. Just giving one example, that only 62% of the households in Bangladesh have the privilege to watch TV-based lessons. And of those, only 25 actually does watch the lessons. Go to the next slide, please. So this is the solution that we are talking. On my right, you see the TV-based lessons which government initiated, on which I mentioned that only a smaller number of privileged children can avail these opportunities. Seeing that, BRAC came out with a very low level of technological solutions, which we call a button phone or a feature phone. Fortunately, 95% of the parents in Bangladesh have this feature phone. So we started with this with the COVID. And this is an innovative solution which you see on the first row. So the key here is not the technology. Technology aided by the children and guided by the teacher. So these are the three core elements in the solution during the COVID. But we are quickly realizing that we need to prepare right now what will happen during the post-COVID. And for post-COVID, we are referring at least two stages. One would be a transitory, immediate after the COVID, and the third one would be a more regular, which would be a new COVID and no scope to go back to the pre-COVID, because the situation would be very different. Go to the last slide, please. Our core in Bangladesh and for BRAC is to reach the unreached. But at the same time, we are very strategic about our stand, that we stand for all, and all means all. And this calls for a very combined and collective effort. We are fully aware that schooling is fundamentally important, both for boys and girls, but it is even more for girls. The home-based solutions that is happening during the COVID may not be solving the problems of the girls in the post-COVID unless we are fully preparing them. And here I would like to draw the attention of all of you. Thanks to our partnership with the Educate a Child,
30 seconds,
we had a lot of innovations, and we should leverage those innovations. It is the time to combine the lessons with the actions. And it is the time that we show courage, because we can do it if we are putting ourselves together. We need to make sure that let us give an opportunity to all children to catch up during the COVID and show a path for a better life in the post-COVID. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for those comments. Very much appreciated. Thank you for that contribution. Let us now, it's my great pleasure now to introduce His Excellency Mr. Fahad Al-Solati, the CEO of Education Above All. Your Excellency, our previous speakers, as you've seen, have raised many challenges, many common challenges, and there's definitely some common themes, but also optimistic and a call for reimagining education and moving forward. It is evident that the global education community, but also the community in each country needs to work together in order for us to step up and meet this challenge. We very much appreciate to hear from you now, to appreciate your insights on some of the ways that we as practitioners and as funders can be most effective in building responsive and equitable education systems as we move into the recovery phase. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Robert, very much. And I really would like to thank the Excellencies and the partners for this inspiring speech, and really we learn a lot of some of the challenges that they are facing with us today. And definitely there are lots of challenges, especially come with the COVID-19. But let me tell you, very important things that we gained today, that Qatar Fund for Development, as you have seen and been announced by His Excellency Mr. Khalif Al-Kuwari, that 50% of their contribution now have been reached to go to education. And thanks God that their contribution is really continuing to Education Above All foundations. And I think this is the angle that we're going to start today with. Definitely, the foreign aid donors may relocate or reduce funding away from the international educations now in response to the global health prevention for the COVID-19. For example, according to the recent report that we have seen, 73% of non-profit have been seeing a decline on the number of contributions that they're receiving from their ODAs or from the private donors, except for the development banks, for sure, and our colleagues from development banks is here. That's why we try to make this together, to make the things that moving forward. Therefore, many NGOs around the globe are now decreasing its spending and staff, accordingly showing down the project implementation plan. However, Education Above All Foundation is working to overcome the new set of challenges posed by the COVID-19 through our partners and through our strong commitment, to this crisis response. We plays an interesting role in relation to linking our commitment through Qatar Fund for Development with our commitment from the partners, for example, World Bank, ISFD, Asian Bank, the new commitment that's coming from, thanks for them, and for the most marginalized children around the world. We're also bringing a co-funding with further expands the available resources. The leverage is important too. Recently, our strategic partner, GBE, has committed for more than $500 million to COVID, which is yet another important contribution to education. All of this is about putting money where it's needed and where it can make a positive difference. Our new contribution to the new framework agreement that we're going to have soon, with our partner, the Asian Development Bank, is the contribution for $100 million, where 2 years ago, we have signed with Islamic Development Banks for almost $300 million. And last year, we have the agreement with the World Bank for $125 million from each. So total was $250 million contribution together. And hopefully, we are moving forward with a number of new projects. We keep talking and we listen today about a lot of innovation and how it's important. We believe on that. We believe innovation is one of the solutions that we need to come with. We cannot go for the traditional way where education has become. So through Education Above All Foundation, we work with our expert teams inside EAA to develop a curriculum design, for materials that can be taught inside homes. We support families, how we can do this with them. We have people that are from 135 countries now, looking through our website and trying to download all these materials that we are doing, and encourage all the people here to go and to visit our bank resources too. Through Educate a Child program, we work with our partners on a number of ways how to solve the issue on with regards to the COVID-19. We come with a lot of solutions of raising awareness activities on the program, TV activities. We go with the radio too. We replace school feeding program by home distribution. We did not stop this. We launched a distance learning program through a number of phone and internet. We are now having a new hour agreements, with number of countries. We are moving forward. Hopefully, I will give some examples, for Ethiopia, Gambia, India. We're going to work with our partners in Nigeria, and Gambia for sure. Thank you for His Excellency. Your speech today was really inspire us about how it's important the Gambia's needs, and this is really we try to do with all the countries, especially with the COVID-19. I would like to thank you all and thank you for the time and contribution that you have given today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Very much appreciated. And thank you for wrapping up this panel discussion so coherently, and also for the optimism. And we very much appreciate your leadership in the sector. So colleagues, as you'll see from the time, and to be respectful of everyone's time, we do need to close on time. But I did notice through the Q&A, and many of the comments have been addressed by many of the panelists. I do want to just give the floor for a very brief, if it's up to a minute, if possible, to the head of International Education for Save the Children, Hele Gunamanson. Can you just take the floor for a minute, please? Over to you. Okay, there may be a mic problem there. Let's come back if we can. Let me just now, as we're wrapping up, pass to actually an exciting part of the agenda is our two youth advocates, Ms. Nouf Al-Jafiri and Mr. Usman Kamara. And they're going to take us through a virtual exhibition that includes examples of relevant work that Education Above All has supported during the pandemic. So I do hope that all participants and panelists stay for this now virtual exhibition. Can I pass over to our two youth advocates, please?
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Nouf and Uthman here. We are EAA Youth Advocates, and we're excited to take you on this virtual tour today. This crisis has forced many, sorry, where are the presentation?
It will come up. Yep, it's up.
So COVID-19 outbreak has interrupted the education of billions of children and youth around the world. This crisis has forced many governments to relocate funds to support their health response. Unfortunately, this, alongside a downturn in the global economy, could not only mean less funds, but also less priority being placed on the provision of education for the most marginalized. Next slide, please. In many instances, this health pandemic has caused an education pandemic. It has forced teachers and school administrators to reinvent the way they teach and connect with students. So this situation has shed more light on the importance of ensuring sustainable and resilient solutions going forward so that the education community can be prepared for different types of crises. Next slide, please. EAA has generated solutions to help mitigate its impact and meet the needs of learners. So for those with technology, EAA's Innovation Development Directorate has published a curated list of free e-learning resources in 8 languages and is developing a virtual teacher toolkit. For those with no access to technology, IDD has developed a bank of educational projects that do not require technology and are specifically provided for low resource homes. And resources have been downloaded from over 111 countries. Next slide, please. Education activities in some places have been able to continue in spite of the pandemic. So EAC and RISE International aims to enroll 24,000 of the most marginalized out-of-school children in Angola. This project remains on track because construction workers building new schools are quarantining together on site, therefore remaining safe and healthy. In Pakistan, Mali, and Iraq, EAC partners ARC, EDC, and UNESCO are ensuring that learning never stops by conducting lessons through electronic delivery via the internet and computers, WhatsApp, telephone, and the radio. Next slide, please.
Next slide, please. As the world grapples with unparalleled, as Al Fakhura scholar Ahmed in Gaza said, small steps save a huge number of lives. Education is a key ally in defending rights and protecting the rule of law. It provides life skills that are essential, especially during trying times such as this. At EAA, one of our goals is to safeguard inclusive quality education by protecting the right to education as a universal human right. Next slide, please. Education can be a lifeline for children in crisis. It does not only protect children, such as Osama here, from physical and psychosocial danger, but it gives these children and communities hope for the future, providing order, structure, and a sense of normalcy. Protecting education creates more space for foundations, such as Education Above All, to ensure that provision is possible. Next slide. In conclusion, unfortunately, it often takes a crisis to realize what is more important to each of us. Education Above All has always maintained that its partnerships are the key to ensuring that education is a reality for all. When partners from multiple sectors prioritize the importance of education, it creates one voice, one which is capable of being responsible for shifting of priorities on a large scale. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both Ms. Noufal Jafari and Mr. Usman Kamara, both youth advocates. Very impressive presentation. Thank you very much for your contribution, and thank you for your continued work in the education sector and the partnership with Education Above All. So this brings us to the end of the discussion and the panelists. On behalf of EAA, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all our speakers for their very interesting and important statements, and for their continued strong commitment to partnering for education, particularly for the most marginalized out-of-school children around the world. COVID-19 pandemic has had a huge impact on the education sector. It's really of a historic magnitude, and never before has education been disrupted at this scale. But we have also witnessed unparalleled global solidarity to reach children during these trying times, but also rebuild education systems, rebuild them better, and at this time, making them more resilient moving forward. I felt today's discussion highlighted the very strong commitment of so many different education partners, in particular the EAA and its partners, and the achievements that they have achieved together to build on and strengthen existing collaboration, including with ISFD and the World Bank. The announcements launching new partnerships even further mark stronger outcomes in response to EAA's effort in building a strong network of resource partnerships. In light of the current global pandemic, it is ever more important to secure additional funding and to assure that learning never stops. Investment in education is essential to breaking the cycle of poverty, curbing violence, and addressing prevailing inequalities. And yet, education in crisis, in those contexts which face crisis, and now it's at a global scale, remains chronically underfunded. The current pandemic has foregrounded the importance of sustainable but also innovative financing to protect education budgets and ensure sustainability of solutions, both in terms of the response to this pandemic, but also as we move to the road to recovery and to build resilience to future shocks. Thank you again to all our panelists. Thank you to all the participants for your insights today. We look forward to the continued partnership. Thank you. Goodbye.